everyone. Welcome to another rendition of WXR. I'm your host this week, Chriz, aka The Mole. Joining me, as usual, is James Phoenix, Marcus Shadow, and Richter Hammer.
Yo.
This week, we're doing a evaluation, but not a superstar evaluation. No, we're doing an era evaluation. And we thought we'd start with the Attitude Era. Whether you love it, whether you hate it, you can't deny the fact it defined a generation. So we're going to go through, we're going to look at superstars, matches, storylines, feeling of the era, and any problems. And then we can all rate the era. So, to take us away, how about Marcus Shadow? Would you like to kick it off with superstars?
Sure, and just for the record, the Attitude Era is when I started watching wrestling in WWE. I came in the late middle of the Attitude Era, so the early stuff I'm not too well versed in. But superstars, the superstars of that era is where we got a lot of what is pervasive through WWE and wrestling in general today. It brought about trash talking, swearing, nudity or half nudity, and just general not giving a shit in the ring, pretty much. It just beating people up and going hardcore, basically using weapons and whatnot. Now, of course, now in the PG era, they don't do that, the hardcore part, too much. And of course, a lot of the moves from that era have since been banned, due to other reasons, headshots and whatnot.
I will also point out we had trash talking before that era.
Yeah, but this was trash talking taken to another level. This is the era that gave us probably the best mic men in the business. I don't think any touch the best mic men of this era. Of course, I'm referring to The Rock, Stone Cold, Chris Jericho, the top three mic men of the business, in my opinion.
I'd say Shawn Michaels and Hulk Hogan are pretty damn good.
Shawn Michaels was good. Hogan, in his prime, might have been. I didn't really see him until he was old man Hogan, so I can't really say.
Fair enough.
And Triple H was okay when he wasn't droning on and on and on about his ego.
Oh, I'm not giving it to I'm not saying Triple H because that was Triple H really his microphone skills developed in that era. Because before that he was given a gimmick that didn't really work for him.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And let us not forget that there were a lot of great mic men before that era. For example, Roddy Piper.
No, there were great mic men before. Of course there were. I did not say there weren't. I'm just saying this era is the era that took mic skills to another level. It's the era that gave us mic men that to this day have never been touched in the mic skills. People have come close, but no, just no cigar.
Fair enough. But what did you think about the superstars, like specific ones, like goods, bads?
Before we get into that, Chris, did you want to, for the benefit of the listening audience, define exactly what we're referring to by Attitude Era from starting and ending?
The era that WWE lists as the Attitude Era.
I don't know what it is that they list, to be honest.
It's fine. You can look it up later. Later.
Okay.
Later.
Then how is he going to be productive in this conversation? Anyway, but what do you mean by what do I think of the superstars? I liked them. I mean, Attitude Era will always hold a special place in my heart just because, again, it's where I started my WWF/E viewing journey here.
No, he means like specific superstars.
Yeah, I mean like specific ones. Like I know you liked The Rock. I thought you may have gone into a little talk about how you liked him, or there may have been some stars in that era you may not have liked, like Viscera.
So you're asking who I liked. Okay. Yeah, I like The Rock. He's probably my favorite WWE superstar of all time, and we'll get into him in the coming weeks here because we will be recording that look at The Rock. Of course, there's Stone Cold Steve Austin, the Attitude Era's Super Cena. Or I guess you could say Super Cena is the now era Stone Cold. Beer swilling, middle finger, kind of swearing, redneck. It was, of course, D-Generation X, my favorite staple of all time, through its different variations. Kind of sucked when he went into McMahon Helmsley era, but original DX, awesome.
Speaking of your favorite
Of
superstar, The
course,
Rock, is that when we go to talk about him, are we going to have some awesome throwbacks to that great Rock DVD review you and Mole did?
that's effectively going to be the Rock DVD review. But
Only
of
took
course,
you how many years?
There's always, yeah, I know. But there's always the Undertaker. I mean, he's there through all. And the Attitude Era, he was awesome. They did kind of screw with him a little bit. And I know Mole kind of didn't like what they did with him during the latter part of the Attitude Era with the whole corporate ministry thing. But
I didn't like the concept of the corporate ministry because then it took what was actually kind of cool, the ministry, and it made it all about the McMahons and the Austin feud again. It's like it's sort of like now when everything revolves around Cena. But Ministry Taker was fucking awesome. I did like Ministry Taker. I will go on record saying I liked Ministry Taker.
yeah, Ministry Taker was awesome. Corporate Ministry, not so much. Of course, there's always Mick Foley, Mankind. He's always awesome. But I think the one thing that kind of sets the Attitude Era apart from any era that's come since is that was the era when divas knew how to wrestle. And when it was the women's champion, not the Divas Championship, which I'm sorry, I much prefer the women's title.
I prefer the women's title as well. But how about Jim and Rick?
Chirp, chirp.
Yeah, I was gonna let Jim go, but okay. For superstars that we liked.
Liked and didn't like.
Oh, okay. Obviously, I liked Austin. I think he's ridiculously fucking fun to watch. The Rock was amazing. Edge and Christian. I know there was a time when I liked Edge. You might find that surprising.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Edge. And
like the Brood. Oh man, that shit.
I didn't know
cool,
you
that
disliked Edge.
I do now. Yeah.
Fair enough.
The Hardy Boys.
Yep. Yeah, Hardy Boy. They just. Oh man.
The tag team division. When there was a tag team division.
Yeah. But yeah, DX of course was cool, even though it had Triple H in it. Ones I didn't like. Oh, and before that, also ones I liked, of course, Godfather and Val Venus. I mean, what a crazy era! You can have a porn star and a pimp as just characters. Like that shit's funny. People I didn't like. Oh man, it's hard to top Mark Marrow. He's always my like go-to like scrub. Like he's the height of scrub to me. Oh man, yeah. Who else?
Well, you're at the height of the scrub that when you get your ass powerbombed by Sable.
He's no Brooklyn Brawler.
Yeah, I like the
my
Brooklyn
hometown
Brawler. Hero. Oh man, there's got to be someone else that I dislike, but I can't remember him.
Gobbledygooker.
He was fine.
Yeah.
And that was pre-Attitude Era.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Oh man.
The Attitude Era, they just had a lot of great gimmicks and a lot of great wrestlers. Because
Mankind was good too. I know we're in dislike, but Mankind. If no one mentions him, I thought he was really good too. I mean, entertaining. I mean, he wasn't a great wrestler, but you knew you were in for a show whenever he was there, and he was actually not bad on the mic, all things considered.
Yeah, he was a good mic man. I mean, considering he was able to do 3 different characters and make them sound completely different, he's pretty damn good on the mic.
Oh yeah.
So he could talk after being chokeslammed through the cell and thrown off of it. Yeah, that's
that too.
And how about you, Jim?
Oh, well, much like our good friend Marcus Shadow here, I started watching a good chunk of the way into the Attitude Era. I always recall off the top of my head the very first match I ever saw in its entirety in WWE. And this is because at the time I did not really know the schedule of the shows because there really wasn't an internet back then, so I couldn't look up I didn't know when the shows were on to look it up, and I was too lazy to buy a TV guide, or I didn't think of it. But I remember the first match I ever saw was Test versus Edge. I'm assuming it was on Raw, and I remember because it was during the storyline where it was supposedly like the whole. Test was trying to win over Stephanie thing, right before the whole Triple H marries Stephanie thing. So that was about where I came in. So I always remember a lot of the Attitude part was gone by the time all this started kicking in. The McMahon Helmsley era kicked in and everything else. So a lot of it was pre what I started watching, but I've seen a lot of it in retro flashbacks. videos, etc., the things they do on Raw. And obviously, my favorite star of all time is anybody who's ever listened to one of our wrestling videos can tell you is Chris Jericho. And that was when I started loving him. Back in the days where he would come out and he would just tear into Stephanie McMahon with no remorse whatsoever. Because that was when he was at his best. As much as I like Jericho now, he's got awesome jackets. He was at his best when he could be free and he could tear into somebody that legitimately knew that it was for fun and that could have fun back with him, like Stephanie. And that might have been part of what pissed Triple H off. But he was always the best. The Rock was, of course, number one. Greatest promo in the history of forever, right off the top of my head, is the night that during the invasion storyline, which I guess is kind of post Attitude, but Booker T and I think Shane and Stephanie and somebody else, they were in the ring, and The Rock and Jungle came out and kept trying to out promo each other on the Alliance, which led to the one and only time that I know off the top of my head that the Rock dropped an F-bomb on TV.
Yeah.
So
if we're talking about our favorite promo, my favorite promo of all time, and it is a Rock one, has to be the debut of Chris Jericho, because that is the only time where you will see The Rock make a grown man cry. Literally, Jericho was about to be in tears. That's how awesome that promo was.
It is. Yeah, that's also a great promo. Other people I like from that era, Undertaker and Kane were cool. I always like seeing them beat people up. That was always fun. They had great gimmicks going on. It was one of the solid gimmicks that was always maintained. Austin, I loved Austin. He was my favorite superstar for a long time too. I always liked his stuff. Yeah, a lot. As for no, well, I said, well, a lot of I don't remember him. A lot about him specifically. Just somebody that was just fun to watch. Was I was like Crash Holly. Just see him come out with this scale and try to defend his title against like 80 dudes at once.
The Hardcore 24/7 was one of the best angles ever.
Yep.
But and if I recall correctly, the best part of that was the night that they were doing that, and he almost got away, and then Molly smacked him in the face with a frying pan.
Yep.
Yep.
Well,
yeah. And then in terms of guys I didn't really like of Attitude Era, it's hard to remember anybody that I explicitly really didn't like per se. I mean, everybody, even if they were necessarily heels, you kind of had to like them just because they were it was so much fun to hate them. And everything else. There wasn't really anybody I could think of I specifically didn't like off the top of my head from back in those days. If I think of anybody, I'll let you know, but you can go ahead and move on.
Triple H, when it started to become all about him.
Fair enough. Superstars, for me, I liked Undertaker, I liked Kane, I liked Jericho. I loved it when they brought in, which this is kind of at the end of the Attitude Era, maybe, or so, but I don't know. So you may or may not count these, but I loved it when they brought in, and please, no obvious jokes here. Let's try and avoid this time. But I liked it when they brought in Chris Benoit, Dean Malenko, Perry Saturn, Eddie Guerrero. I loved Kurt Angle. I loved Rey Mysterio when he. I loved these guys that could wrestle in the ring. That was awesome. I loved those guys. I loved Ivory, seeing her. That was kind of cool. I loved Chyna when post DX, when she was on her own going after the guys and stuff, because that was actually kind of cool to see a woman stand up to the guys. It was kind of fun. So I enjoyed that. The stuff I didn't like with the superstars, I didn't like Austin because, well, go watch anything I've mentioned with Cena and it's the same thing. I didn't really like Jeff Hardy because he was just jumping off shit and it was like, eh. I absolutely, really passionately hated what they did to British Bulldog. I mean, that physically annoyed me. That made me turn red when I saw it. Because they took British Bulldog, are basically the hero from over here, famous for coming out with the Union Jack all over him, and took away everything that made him British Bulldog and put him in jeans. It's like, fuck off. Fuck off. That would be like, for those of you that enjoyed the Attitude Era from over there, for like Richter, let's say, that would be like if you saw Austin come out on TV this week, basically dressed in Hawaiian shirts and acting like an everyday normal guy that likes his fruit punch, you would be annoyed. Or how about you take The Rock and you don't let him speak and you just turn him into a generic walking fucking like Brock Lesnar like villain? It wouldn't work. That physically annoyed me. I also never really liked Viscera and Midian. They were like, eh.
Yeah.
But like I said, you did have a load of talented guys in that era. I do admit that, like Edge and Christian, Matt Hardy at the time was awesome. So yeah, you did have some decent ones. And of course, I didn't really like Mae Young in that era.
No,
Hmm.
that was incredibly stupid.
Mae Young, the person who joined the Attitude Era when it was all about sexist stuff, ripped open her shirt at the Royal Rumble and exposed her breasts. Well, just after the UK over here had the Royal Rumble on Channel 4, one of our normal channels, because one of the other pay-per-view characters lost the rights, so these ones picked it up. And then they effectively said they're airing no more pay-per-views. As a result, it almost got it banned with how shit it was. It's like,
Wow.
no, fuck that crap. Luckily, Sky came in and saved him, picked up the deal again. I'm like, yeah, we got him back. So it was like, okay, thank God. But that was touch and go right there.
Hmm.
Little bit, little bit.
And of course, Attitude Era also had Jeff Jarrett, which I liked. But
Yeah.
Well,
Oh,
Attitude Era
yeah.
had some questionable stuff, but again, like I alluded to, it's because of the Monday Night Wars. It's because at that point, WWE was like balls to the wall. Let's see what we can get away with because we need to get arranged to beat WCW, which
Eh.
they kind of failed to do until Vince bought them out. But
I'm aware, and we can go into that near the end. I was just saying what I didn't like, 'cause like I said, British Bulldog thing really annoyed me. But like I said, they also had some great talent. Like the
Yeah.
people that could go in there and wrestle a proper clinic, fucking awesome. Loved those guys.
Yeah.
But how about we could take it away next to the next category and let's evaluate and look at and discuss the matches of the era, like the good stuff you liked with some of the matches, the bad stuff, and to lead this category, I'm going to allow Richter Hammer.
Oh, great.
That didn't sound like you were infused.
No. I'm trying to just.
Okay, would you like me to say James Phoenix?
Yeah, go for that. I'm trying to think.
Okay then, James Phoenix.
Someone who knows even less.
Yeah, thanks for that.
About women or wrestling?
Heyo.
Both.
Funny. So what are you talking about? Divas is that we're doing here?
Wow.
Matches.
Matches? Oh, okay.
Pay attention.
Yeah. So matches. Well, in terms of memorable matches that stick out in my mind from the Attitude Era, like I said, the one that's always sticks out is the first one I saw, the Edge Test match. It wasn't all that good, but it's the first one I saw, so it sticks out in my mind. Other great matches I remember seeing from the Attitude Era, I recall. I'm trying to think. I mean, obviously, Mankind off the Cell. I get to see that live, but in retro footage, I feel like I did. That's just a freaking amazing moment. I remember TLC matches were always awesome. The three tag teams, those were some of the best matches I ever saw. Always loved watching those. High flyers, boom, boom. That was always great. I always enjoyed. Let's see what else. It was after the Attitude Era. Number like a Shadow, I gotta think.
Great. The guy who knows the most and the guy who knows the least knows nothing, so you're going to the middleman. That's awesome. I mean, the Attitude Era gave rise, gave birth, if you will, to some of the greatest match types in history. To a degree, nowadays, they've kind of bastardized some, and they've kind of evened out a lot of them, because they don't want people to actually get hurt, and they realized, these match types are kind of fucking up our people. But this is the era that gave us the ladder match. Thank
it's
you,
not.
Sean.
No, it's not. The era before, Razor Ramon v. Shawn Michaels.
Oh, was Razor Ramon v. Sean in the era before? My bad.
Yeah, New Generation era, as the game put it.
Yep.
But
And this is the era
this is
that
the one that
gave
gave us
the
TLC.
Yeah, the TLC match, which took ladder match to the next level. You can thank Edge and Christian, the Hardy Boys, and the Dudley Boys for that. So EC Dub.
EC Dub.
But Yeah, and it gave rise to that because this was also the era of hardcore. This is where nothing was off limits. Where you could have weapons, you could have half naked women in the ring. You could, this is the era they gave us bra and panties match for God's sake.
But again, it probably shouldn't.
Mm.
Yeah, well, but a lot of the matches that either came about because of the era or more prominent and more mainstream, quote unquote, because of this era, are still prevalent to this day. And I thank this era for that, for giving us things like TLC, stuff like that.
Yep. Um, since those two were thinking, I'll say match type wise, I will say, yeah, they gave us some pretty good matches. My favorite match from this era would be. It's not going to be the other one because they put that under ruthless aggression, so people probably wouldn't count that. So I'm going to go. My favorite one would be, of course, Hell in a Cell,
Yeah.
but not the Mick Foley one. The Mick Foley one is awesome, but I'm always surprised that just because it was spot after spot, which was kind of cool for some people. I'm always like, huh? People just overlooked the Shawn Michaels Undertaker one. That one was fucking awesome. It was Undertaker and Shawn Michaels. And it was Shawn Michaels during one of the few parts of this era where he was actually involved because, unfortunately, due to back injuries, later on, like his feud leading up to with Austin and stuff like that, you could tell he was injured because he wasn't Shawn Michaels at that point, if that makes sense. And then we didn't see him for a while. But Shawn Michaels v Undertaker in Hell in a Cell was fucking awesome. I loved that match.
Mm-hmm.
Did not enjoy Kennel in a Cell.
Ah.
And I think the same era, because it was Ministry Taker, did not enjoy Big Boss Man Undertaker Hell in a Cell,
Yeah.
where he tries to hang him to make the big spot, and you could clearly see he's just clicked onto the back of his fucking collar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But my favourite series of matches in this one, though, I loved, and again, no jokes, Kurt Angle v Chris Benoit when they did the essentially the best out of series. That was awesome. I loved that. I also kind of enjoyed a concept I enjoyed with the match types as well, which I don't know if you're going to count this as Attitude Era or slightly after it. I'm going to count it as Attitude Era, since according to the game, when Attitude Era, then Ruthless Aggression, so it'll count, was I liked Three Stages of Hell. I love that concept.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, Triple H v Austin may not like those two guys around that time, or Triple H be cool, I'll give him that. Ed wrestling at that time, I just didn't really like him because of the promo stuff. However, I like that concept. You start off with one match, and you go to another, and you go to another. And they did the same kind of concept with Chris Benoit and Kurt Angle too at one point, which I like that concept. That's a cool concept. That needs to be back in the games.
Yes, I agree.
I enjoyed that. I enjoyed some of the hardcore matches, which may surprise some people, but I did enjoy some of the hardcore matches. They were pretty cool. But like I said, my favorite stuff would be my favorite match types would probably be matches would be that Hell in a Cell, and probably the first and second TLCs, because it was exposure for the tag team division, and you could tell all the people in there, they were young, they were doing shit that was just damaging their body and could, as the people always say, shave years off their career. But they didn't care. They wanted to go out there and give people the best possible show and get over with the crowd, which it worked. I like that. I kind of wish we had something like that for teams nowadays, which that was kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
Looking back on it, my least favorite shit is most of the stuff to do with the divas, like I mentioned, because it's really fucking sexist, and to the point where I almost just fast forward it now on DVDs.
Mm.
But that was the best and worst. How about you two?
Yeah, my
Um,
favorite match, probably one of my favorite matches, has to be like the first TLC matches and just the first several TLC matches, because it was stuff you'd never seen before unless you watch like ECW or something. But even in some of that stuff you hadn't seen, and it put the tag team division on the map as well, because it was almost always teams doing it, which is like, okay, these guys are working well together, and they're doing shit with weapons you've never seen before. But out and out, probably my favorite, well, quote unquote match had to have been, and I can't remember the pay per view, but it was the Hardcore 24/7 for the entire night, just because it was the pinnacle of hilarity. Just you didn't know what was going to happen because anything could happen. I mean, we had Mighty Molly to the Hurricycle, bang, and Mighty Molly takes it from the Hurricane. It's just like, wow, just random shit in the backstage coming
Oh, is
out of
that who
nowhere.
she
It's
hit
like,
with the frying pan? I thought it was back when she was Molly Holly and she hit Crash with the pan. Okay. That explains
no,
why I can't
she
remember that
was
properly.
Mighty Molly's Mighty Molly to the Huracycle. Right.
Yep.
Bam in the back of the head.
Uh,
Or you have Christian slamming a door in someone's face. It was awesome. You just didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah.
it did. Uh, how about Jim and Richter? Have you guys fought yet?
One thing I came up with,
Yeah.
and I can't remember if this might have been a little post Attitude Era, I think, but I specifically remember an awesome series of matches where Kurt Angle was obsessed with doing everything better than Shawn Michaels.
That would be way after the
Was
Attitude
it
Era.
way after? Okay, I couldn't
Because
remember.
that'd be when
Yeah.
Shawn Michaels came back from retirement.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
But it was still awesome as fuck.
Yeah.
When he sang.
I do have to say also, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this as one of my favorite all-time things.
Kennel no cell.
No. So, you say you have someone who can stop me, huh? Well, let's see this guy. Who's going to stop me? Doom, 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 doom. It's like, oh, shit, that's Taz.
Yep.
Yeah.
Win if you can. Survive if I let you. Sorry, I love that catchphrase.
It's cool.
Richter.
For the match types I like, definitely TLCs. Those were really fun to watch. And excuse me, coming off of ECW, also the hardcore ones were usually fairly entertaining. But that era just had lots of crazy ones that they just made up,
Oh yeah.
like Braun Panty tuxedo match.
Mhm.
The pig wrestling was later, but
Inferno.
Evening
yeah,
gown.
Inferno match and all those
Casket.
like
Buried
blank on a
Alive.
pole match and stuff.
The Lion's Den match.
Yeah, that too.
I will say, blank on a pole, which they've done that throughout various eras and stuff. However, I will say my favourite blank on a pole is actually from the Attitude Era. It's technically the Man Helmsley era, but WWE's counting as Attitude. I did enjoy The Rock v Mankind with the loser being fired. Because that was actually kind of emotional to see them fight when they were tag team partners with and being forced into it with the winner actually essentially firing his own friend. That's kind of cool. I like that.
Hmm.
Indeed.
I don't know if Richter agreed with that one.
Yeah, it was okay.
It was yeah, it was okay.
I think it's safe to say there will never be another Attitude Era, primarily because, let's face it, Vince no longer has competition.
It'll
Mhm.
also be also won't be another Attitude Era because it was very much a product of the time.
Yeah.
True. Well, I meant the concept behind it, the whole, let's push the envelope, push the boundaries, and pretty much do everything we can possibly get away with just because we have competition and we need to kind of buck up and
Yeah,
and do it. And the restraints are never going to come off again because Vince essentially and effectively has no competition.
yeah, but like I said, part of it was the competition. Part of it is was also the times, because like I've mentioned in the past, everything in the 90s had to have attitude. Like I mentioned, even
True.
Sonic had attitude. Whereas, like nowadays, the quote in thing is social media, and this is the part where you can do hashtags and now trending and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm waiting for the zombie apocalypse. That way, lumberjacks will be so much more cooler.
Mhm.
Zombie Jack match.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or brains on a pole match.
There you go.
Okay, moving on from matches then. How about let's go on to, because I know Richter should be able to do this one then. How about storylines, Richter? What storylines did you enjoy? Did you hate?
Definitely any of the ones where Rock specifically or Jericho were making fun of Stephanie. Those were always fun.
Yes.
Hardcore 24/7.
I actually liked the DX Nation one just because I liked when they would like dress up as each other and the Jason Sensation and stuff like that. That was entertaining.
Look, it's Mizark.
Yeah. Oh man. Uh, the Rock versus Stone Cold, and oh yeah, and the Rock Stone Cold ones. Those were okay. Um, as it's just been mentioned to me when Big Show versus Shane when he threw him into the Titantron, that was fun. Um, hmm. Yeah,
Austin
wasn't so
v.
much a fan
McMahon.
of the huh? Austin, oh
Austin
yeah,
v.
but that
McMahon.
was like the whole yeah.
I'll take it from here, Doctor. What? Bow, bow,
Yeah,
bow.
those were some ones. Probably went on a bit too long with corporate ministry. I was not a fan of all that, but before that, yeah, it was definitely really good.
Pillman's got a
Yeah.
gun.
And the also it was stupidly entertaining at the time, but the Val Venus with Kai and Tai, that one was really fun. The choppy pee pee.
Yep. And I will say at first the McMahon Austin feud did make a lot of sense, like Richter said. I will say, like he said later on it got a little repetitive. I also didn't like the fact a lot of times later on, not at first. At first they went out of their way to explain it. I didn't like the thing where later on they didn't explain some stuff that kind of needed to be explained. Like The Rock was fighting because, well, not The Rock, Austin was fighting because Linda McMahon put his job on the line, or whatever it was, as CEO, or whatever it was, and he's climbing up the ladder to grab the briefcase, and it goes higher and higher and higher and higher. And Vince and Shane swear down it was not them, and they looked shocked. Austin looked shocked. We didn't know what the hell was going on, and next night on Raw, they didn't tell us what happened. I want to know who pulled up the briefcase. That's almost like the mystery GM. I need to know this shit, WWE. Stop leaving shit out in the open.
We know who the mystery GM was. It was Hornswoggle.
We know that now, but years after, like a year afterwards or 2 years afterwards, people didn't care about the answer.
So,
But continue, Rick. I was just discussing.
Yeah. Those were only those are the ones that I can remember offhand. That those were entertaining. So,
I kind of wish I was going next.
you can go next. Go ahead.
Yay! Speaking of offhand, the worst story in the Attitude Era.
yes. Don't
Yes.
even bring it up, dude.
No.
That's terrible.
Mae
my
Young,
God, yes.
I was
Mark
trying
Henry
not to bring that.
giving birth to a hand. The best story and worst, like mixed bag for me, was the Ministry thing. I loved the Ministry at first. The hell the higher power was. I loved the where to, Stephanie. Burning at the teddy bear that brought Vince to his knees. It was cool, and then we found out it was Vince, and it became me. But I like that storyline. See where they go. I loved Mankind before he became comical Mankind. I loved the dark Mankind that was actually able to challenge the Undertaker with the levels of dark side. That was kind of cool. I kind of loved the storyline of the Terry Runnels Invitational. That was fun as fuck. And like I mentioned, the storyline of China becoming Intercontinental Champion. And as much as a lot of people may or may not have liked it, I really loved China Jericho co-Intercontinental Champion, with those two constantly trying to get each other beat up and stuff. Like China going to Tori and being like, I know, it's weird. What's that? Jericho, he mentioned he wanted to do stuff with you, and she was implying he was hitting on him. Just so Tori ran out there, and you see China put her feet up and just grin. Next scene is Kane, who was Tori's boyfriend, beating up Jericho. That was kind of fun. We haven't seen a co-champion do that type of thing before. That was kind of fun.
Yeah. On a related note, if you read Jericho's book, he and China both hated that fucking storyline.
But they may have. It was still fun.
Because they did not like each other at all, primarily because China was dating Triple H at the time, and Triple H and Jericho have never liked each other. So,
But like that, I enjoyed that storyline. I also kind of liked the storyline with the Radicals were brought in. That was fun.
I miss
But-
Moppy.
Yeah, Moppy. This podcast should be in loving memory of Moppy.
I agree.
Indeed.
Poor Moppy.
Indeed. I think WWE almost fell into the same shit that WCW did, and I think the reason they quote won the Monday Night Wars is because they stopped themselves from falling into it, and that is the putting everybody in one stable trap. Because corporate ministry. That's all I have to say. That was effing ridiculous. Where you have the corporation and the ministry together. It's like, well, there's about a third of your roster.
Yep. To be
No,
fair as
another-
well, the other reason they won the Monday Night Raws was at the end of it when Vince Russo went from WWE and became in charge.
Yeah,
He sort of ran it into the ground, made a whole bunch of stables no one gave a shit about, and basically made it so retarded to watch. Oh, it was kind of painful.
And then told the guys like Hulk Hogan, "You don't know anything about wrestling. I know wrestling. I'm the genius here."
Ric Flair.
Yeah, Flair.
Hulk Hogan was the one he called bald, and Hulk Hogan sued him because how dare you call me bald? I'm balding. And part of me is thinking of the Simpsons skit with no one respects the ing or the ding.
There you go.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the problem I had with the Attitude Era is the fact that WWE kind of went buck wild with the stables, and
Yeah.
it wasn't always a good thing. Even though the stables they had were cool, it's like, yeah.
Well, I didn't mind the stables. I wasn't insulting the WWE stables. I was insulting the WCW ones because
Well, I know.
at the time when he did it, when Russo did in WCW, almost every member of the roster was involved in some sort of stable for this big stable war that went fucking nowhere. Whereas at least in the you had all these stables. Some of them were cool. Like I know still not a lot of people like these. I fucking loved Right to Censor,
Yeah, they were awesome.
and I will say
I mean-
Right to Censor, Ivory, hot.
Yeah, I mean the stables were good, but now that I think back on it, it almost felt like basically when one stable or two stables that were feuding each other, when they ran its course, it's like, okay, we need to have a stable, so just fucking make a stable. And it's like you could have just just let the tag team division run as a tag team division instead of a stable division. It would have worked.
Do-
And they
do I
get to me,
smell-
it got a little bit tiring where you always had to have at least one active stable on the roster, which I'm just like, really? You have to have a stable? Really?
Question for you, Marcus.
Mhm.
Live on the air, do I smell another XGR topic in the future? Stables, the good, the bad, and which ones do we like? Hosted by Marcus
W-
Shadow?
I
You mean
do believe
WXR?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Stables, hosted by
Speaking
Marcus.
Speaking of which, Marcus, yes, that's true. Cough Wyatt family, cough Shield.
Yep.
Yeah, but to be fair, the difference between then and now, they don't have a tag team division right now. Whereas
the
in
Authority.
the Attitude Era, they had a fucking awesome tag team division, and then they stacked stables on top of that. And it's just like, no, that's overkill.
Yeah, but nowadays they don't have a tag team division, a women's division, a mid card division properly because that's not being built up.
Cruiserweight division.
All they have is a WWE, but all they have really is the main event division, and the rest of it's just filler.
Yes, but we'll discuss that when we get into the universe era, I suppose.
Yes.
Oh no, I'm pro for the attitude. The attitude era,
yeah.
wow, as people know, I may not like the era, but it did give a lot of focus on the various divisions, which that's always good.
Yeah, they were equal in their representation of superstars and divas, where they went and they showed the talent different titles, and they made every title relevant, as opposed to now where all they give a shit about is the main title, which is like, yeah, fuck.
Which I'm gonna say that came about probably during the Attitude Era, the division dysfunction when they had
It
the
probably
when they
came-
had when they
yeah.
had the invasion, and then they promptly buried the light heavyweight and cruiserweight division.
Came
Ooh.
about when they acquired WCW and ECW, had all this talent, all these titles, and didn't know what the fuck to do with them.
Yep. But But we were on the subject of storylines. Which storylines did you like and hate?
Like I said, I like the Hardcore 24/7. That was a brilliant storyline, I think. Obviously the DX stuff, they are my favorite stable of all time. The Austin McMahon stuff, because I'm sorry, the promos, the stuff that didn't happen in the ring was hilarious. Anything with The Rock, I'm sorry, Rock, yeah, he's awesome. My favorite superstar, as I said. Pretty much almost anything with Jericho, because he's equally as hilarious. I loved the storylines revolving around the tag teams because, like I just said, they had a freaking awesome tag team division that was, actually relevant and could actually wrestle, and actually worked and functioned as tag teams primarily because you had effectively uh, two teams of best friends and a team of brothers. So yeah,
Yep, I know, which with that part of the reason I think that worked better in this era with the Attitude Era, better than it does now, is nowadays you'll see someone like Brodus Clay wrestling on his own, you'll see Tenzai wrestling on his own, I mean you'll see WWE just slap them together. Whereas back then it was like, out comes Michael Hayes, fucking awesome guy by the way, but out comes Michael Hayes, and he's introducing the Hardy Boys, and you're like, ooh, and you want to pay attention because they're introducing them as a team. Therefore, you care about them as a team. Like, the reason people care about the Wyatts and the Shield right now isn't because they were just thrown together. It's because they were introduced as a team. So, which is kind of cool, which means you only know them as a team.
let's be honest. The only reason people even give two shits about the Wyatt family is because they know and like Husky Harris.
I like the gimmick, yeah, but I also like the idea of the idea behind the stable and the gimmick, and the fact they were introduced like that with this new gimmicks and shit as a stable did interest me more than if this had been the Wyatt family and all three of them had been on the roster at once and just then rejoined up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. It'd be better if the other two members of the Wyatt family could actually wrestle, but yeah.
It would be.
Hey, they can do it with effective wrestlers. They give us Los Matadores.
Yes. But storylines.
Yeah, a lot of the storylines back then were actually really good. Of course, there were the occasional shit storylines, cough hand cough. And some of the diva stuff. One thing I did love, and it's what made me actually pay attention to the divas division, or women's division as it was back then, was you have this red-haired chick who started out as one of the Godfather's hoes, turns into a valet for Esther Rios. You're like, okay, she's hot. Then all of a sudden she joins the Hardy Boys and starts kicking ass, and you're like, holy fuck, she can wrestle. Of course, I'm talking about Lita.
Poor Esther Rios.
Yep. Look, I loved Lita. Although this may be a no to some people. My favourite era of Lita is the Edge and Lita. I loved her with Edge. I loved Edge and Lita together. They were kind of cool.
No, because
horrible.
in that era, number one, she was doing a character that you could tell she absolutely fucking hated. Number two, it was the post Lita getting injured, which means she couldn't fucking wrestle.
She couldn't wrestle, but I kind of liked more of what they did with her character than
Trashy
But-
hoe Lita.
Trashy Ho Lita was actually fun. I mean, hell, you just mentioned the Stephanie McMahon, Rock, and Jericho bit. Was that bit not entertaining because Stephanie was meant to be a trashy hoe?
Yeah,
True.
but no one made fun of Lita for it, or at least not
Everyone.
enough.
Everyone made fun of Lita to the point where the whole crowd chanted "slut" really loud at her.
Well, that's because she was, though. Steph, you didn't think she was actually a slut, just a daddy's girl. Lita was actually a slut, so it was a little
Well,
bit.
no, because it depends on your veracity. Because if you were a true WWE fan, you knew she was a slut because you knew that she was sleeping with Macho Man when she was like 14.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and even if you were a quote mark, she dumped Test to be with Triple H. That kind of makes her a slut.
That's true.
But my point was, I actually enjoyed that Lita because she had more of a character. Whereas, don't get me wrong, Attitude Era Lita was fucking awesome, but she always seemed to just match the personality of whichever person she was with. Like, she matched as Rios, she then matched the Hardys, whereas with Edge, she kind of matched Edge, but she had more of her own personality at the same time, which it was a little fun. But like I said, different people can disagree. If I'm sure most people here probably prefer the Attitude Era Lita.
Mm-hmm. In all fairness, if Lita hated that character with Edge, that's her own damn fault for cheating on Matt Hardy
She
with
is the match
Edge.
herself.
Yeah. Don't even get me started on that. But yeah, I love the divas of the Attitude Era just because, A, most of them were hot, and B, most of them could actually wrestle and put on a decent match. I was like, wow, I actually kind of want to watch these matches because they're really good. Also, fun fact, Ivory is from my neck of the woods.
Nice.
Yeah, she lives up here. She lives on an island.
I will also address something possibly just to get a conversation going. What did you think about what WWE did to homosexuals in that era?
You look so good to me.
Yes, that was exactly my point. You had
Is that
China,
Attitude Era?
you had China and the cat as meant to be like master and slave, as they did as like a love couple. You at one point you then had Billy and Chuck and stuff like Billy and Chucky and stuff, and essentially it seemed like they were saying homosexuals were less of people than actual people because they constantly had to make fun of homosexuals.
Trish and Mickey.
I don't know if that's too philosophical for this conversation.
Well, I feel that what they probably had to, because I mean the whole basis of it is two grown men half naked grappling each other. So
Yeah,
they
that
probably
was
feel they
eventually
have
gonna
to
get
do
brought
that to
up.
try and to
Well,
try and.
it was half them making fun of themselves in that respect, but it was also, as you pointed out, Mole, with the Attitude Era in general, it was a function of the time. You have to remember in that era, during that era of life, of societal life, it was a very homophobic era, and in that era, homosexuality was not as widely
Yeah,
accepted as it is today.
it
So the
it
norm
wasn't.
back then was,
It,
or to put it in a not so positive light.
oh, I do agree. It wasn't as welcomed as it was now. However, the the stepping stones, if you will, or the breaking down the walls or the barriers, or whatever, between what was started during that era too. Because like a year or two or before the WWE started to make fun of homosexuals, you had stuff like Ellen having her own sitcom about her coming
True.
out. You had in Dawson's Creek, Jack came out the closet in one of the most emotional scenes on TV. It was awesome. You had all these things where they were starting to accept them, and then you turn over to WWE and it didn't work. It's like it'd be sort of like, and I hate to say this, I don't mean it in this type of way. If anyone's offended, that was my point. But it would be like during the civil rights movement, as black people are becoming more and more accepted. It would then be like turning on TV and then seeing some white guy come out in blackface.
True.
You're kind of hurting what's being done right now. But that was just my
Hmm.
point. I didn't know if you guys agreed or not.
That's
And
true,
I
but
WWE still kind of does that now, which is unfortunate.
in all fairness to that, um, it's not like those types of homosexual type gimmicks are new anyway. Hell, one of the earliest gimmicks in history of pro wrestling was Gorgeous George, who was clearly supposed to be a flaming gay dude.
It was. And like I said, they still do it today. It's like when The Rock came back from WWE and he was feuding with Cena. As much as I loved that first feud with those two, and I bought The Rock Cena, me and Jim will be reviewing that. A lot of The Rock's jokes towards Cena were about, haha, you're gay, haha, you're a woman. And this is during anti-bullying too, and it's like, come on, get over it. We've got right now. We had Darren Young come out the closet, which is awesome. I wish they'd acknowledge it on the air and actually do something productive with those type of things. But that might be a discussion elsewhere. I'm not entirely sure about this. I may have touched upon something that needs to be said more than just in a category for the Attitude Era. I'm not sure.
Well,
Uh,
you
join-
also have to realize, for Vince and the WWE, and probably more for Vince than anyone else, that's kind of a little too controversial, and it's something he'd much rather just sweep under the rug than walk off.
I will say for WXR in the future, and I'm going to put on here intolerance in WWE,
That works.
so we can move the fuck on.
Anyway, I believe I didn't get to say my storylines yet.
True.
So,
I believe no one asked your opinion.
Wow.
fuck you!
If we want your opinion, we'll look up Wikipedia. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Go.
And this podcast is over. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
I was kidding. Jim. Go. We will pretend to listen.
No. Anyway, yeah, in terms of storylines, in terms of the bad, yeah, I see your birth of a hand and raise you Triple H molesting a corpse.
Yeah, there is that too. I forgot about that.
That was still not as bad as the hand, only because while it was Triple H molesting a corpse, like people said, you could tell at the time it wasn't real footage of Kane. Obviously, it was Triple H in a mask, and you could kind of tell it was a dummy. You could see, like, okay, he's just taking a low blow. Whereas Mae Young, Triple H, Mae Young and Mark Henry was kind of disrespectful towards anyone that's lost children. that's kind of like, what the fuck? You just pissed off for people losing, just made it a joke about a hand.
This is true. Speaking of disrespectful storylines, how about the Kiss My Ass Club? That was just fucking stupid. Positive story.
Yeah,
What's that?
and I said, yeah, that was stupid, weird, and a little disrespectful.
Yeah. Anyway, other things. Let's see. Positive storylines from the era. Like Richter said, anything involving Jericho, The Rock, and Stephanie, any combination of those three, always awesome. I specifically remember the what was it? The one I know it's a little post attitude because it was either during or just post the invasion. But while it's gonna go either way depending on how you look at it. DDP stalking Undertaker's wife.
We can allow this because, like we said, according to WWE, who gave it to THQ or 2K or whatever for the new game that just came out, it says it goes Attitude Era, then Ruthless Aggression. So Invasion and McMahon Helmsley era must clearly be Attitude Era.
Yeah. But yeah, I remember that whole situation. I remember it was really awkward and uncomfortable, and they probably shouldn't have done it, which is why it's negative. But I also remember one of my favorite OTW history was after this had been happening for several weeks in a row, and he finally showed up one night on SmackDown, and I just remember everybody just waiting, and everybody just standing there waiting, and you just hear somebody has a death wish, and it's about to be granted. It's like, yeah, beat his ass, Undertaker.
Yep. Which, yeah, I didn't like that storyline for the same reason I didn't like the British Bulldog one. I used to watch WCW. DDP was this laid-back guy that liked to go out there, have fun in the ring, didn't want to get it controversial or be too aggressively evil. That's why I believe to this day he may be one of the few people that flat out refused to join the NWO at one point.
Wow.
He kept like diamond cutting in him every time they offered it to him, which was awesome.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Which, to go from that to Stalker is weird.
Yeah.
In terms of character that you guys will have seen, he was sort of like a hybrid between The Rock and Austin, kind of in that regard. He was like a hybrid between those two, and he went from that to Goldust without makeup. Did not approve. Although I will say, Biker Taker also enjoyed Biker Taker. I did
Biker
like
Taker
that. And I
was
kind
bad.
of wanted to go back to I wanted to go back to Biker before he retires. When he was Biker, I wanted him to be undead again at a certain point because I kind of liked that gimmick. But I appreciated what the Biker Taker let him do, and now I would like him to go Biker again, just so he gets him to actually speak and stuff. And then when he retires, we can have him come out for Hall of Fame ceremonies and stuff, and it not be seen as breaking character.
That would make sense.
I will say Biker Taker is probably my favorite out and out return of all time, just because of the build up they had to it, and then the fucking intro video thing to his Titantron video was just awesome. I was like, oh shit, it's the Undertaker.
Yep.
Yeah, that's always good. My favorite return of all time, just because how piss poorly it was kept, was the first time Jericho came back. Because he himself called it the worst kept secret of professional wrestling, because every fucking buddy knew.
Yep. My favorite return of all time we covered in the previous podcast. I loved seeing Bret Hart come back after all these years because the other ones, it's like The Rock coming back or Undertaker coming back or anything like that. It's like they were injured or they'd left to do other things, but they didn't leave on bad blood. Bret literally left spitting in the face of the company and saying "screw you guys" because they screwed him and fucking off, and just being really aggressively bad blood between them. So to see that felt so huge to watch. That was like nice.
Yeah. Very true. Very true. It's kind of sad that we didn't get a return of the Macho Man before his unfortunate passing.
Yep.
Yeah, but other popular storylines that I recall, one in particular, and I don't know if this was a one-off. One thing I liked about the Attitude Era is that the thing about the Attitude Era was that everybody's personalities were taken to one extreme or another, but every so often they'd reel it back in. Like there'd be these super ultra good, there'd be Austin, The Rock, just annihilating everybody and being super good guys, and there'd be the heels that were just so uberly evil. But then every so often something would remind you that okay, maybe they're not all that bad, or maybe they're not all that good. I recall, and I can't remember if this was a one-off thing or this led into a storyline, but I recall a particular instance in which The Undertaker tried to crucify Stephanie McMahon, and despite being in a feud with her father and the family, Austin came out and saved her because it was the right thing to do.
It was the right thing to do, but then it turns out that was the reason he put the ministry together, because he knew Austin would do the right thing.
Oh, okay.
That's sort of like Joker putting innocents in danger because he knows for a fact Batman will save him.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough.
Which did work,
Yeah.
and
I do have to say, Stephanie on Undertaker's symbol was fucking awesome.
it was.
It
And
was.
I will say, I absolutely love. Does anyone here own the DVD Undertaker or video? If you go on VHS of Undertaker, This Is My Yard.
I do not.
It's one of the many reasons I miss him as Biker Taker was he was sat down doing the discussions like you normally get for People's the Thing. He's like, yes. When he's talking about ministry, he's like, yeah, that's back when I was crucifying the boss's daughter, and I took all your heroes that you loved, like Stone Cold Steve Austin, I hung them off and like a crucifixion off the stage, and I was slashing my wrists and feeding people blood, and he just sort of smiles and goes, the good old days, like he's being nostalgic. And I'm like, that's kind of awesome.
Nice.
But yeah, there's a lot of good storylines, a lot of bad storylines, and it just everything was just always more real and more intense back then. And it's just because they had to win those ratings. And unfortunately today, nothing's nearly that well because they can afford to just lounge around and just let it sit because there's no risk of
Well, the other thing too about the Attitude Era, and it's both a good thing and a bad thing about the Attitude Era, is unlike in today's era, a lot of the stuff back then wasn't scripted.
That too.
Like a lot of the Rock stuff wasn't scripted. A lot of it was The Rock going out there and just saying shit. That's why it was hilarious. A lot of Jericho stuff, I would hazard a guess, wasn't scripted. It was literally Chris going out there saying shit.
Yep.
Whereas in this day and age, I almost guarantee you that John Cena has a personal script writer.
Yep. And since we're touching upon this now, and I think everyone mentioned their storylines. Did Richter mention storylines?
Yes.
Good. I'll let you take us away with this one then, Richter, since you didn't get... you took us away with the last one. But James, I'll let you take us away this time. The overall feel of the era. Describe how you yourself would describe how the Attitude Era felt to you as an individual, and if you go back and look at it now.
Describe how I would describe. Okay, then. Well,
yes.
Like I said, I came in late in the Attitude Era, so a lot of it I missed. But what it seems to me, at the time it was because it was just so, it was intense. It pulled you in because it was shit you didn't see anywhere else. They were willing to do absolutely anything to get you to watch. And so there was it might be naked women in the ring. It might be guys ripping their skin open with barbed wire bats. It might be a dude jumping 80 feet off the rafters to put somebody through a table. You never really knew what you were going to see. And so that was really what pulled you in. In retrospect, I think the reason that it was a big deal back then is because a big audience they had back then, in addition to people that were fans from previous, it was the audience of the teenagers and early 20s. That was the audience at the time. And especially for a lot of the younger teenagers like that, for example, let's say the 12 to 15 demographic.
Like you.
What's that?
Said like you.
Like I would have been at the time, yeah. And the reason it pulled you in was because you watched it, but it was the shit you saw on there was shit that you knew you probably shouldn't be seeing, but you were seeing it anyway, and that's why it was cool. Because it felt like you were watching something you weren't supposed to be watching. It was that sense of the forbidden programming, but you were seeing it anyway. It was on, late at night, past what most people would consider a bedtime. It had, it had Terry Runnels and or the Cat conveniently naked every episode. It had, guys beating each other up with weapons through steel doors, doing insane shit. They're swearing at each other. It was for all intents and purposes adult programming that they were being allowed to watch, or they probably shouldn't have been. And that's what made it cool. It's because it was something that you weren't supposed to be watching. Nowadays with the PG thing, it's still kind of fun to watch, but it's nothing exciting anymore, which is why, because of the way they've geared it, the audience of the WWE, in terms of the people that are not just us that have been programmed by Vince to be good little automatons and watch it every week, is that they're up to say maybe age 10 to 12, because after that point, that's kids start realizing this wrestling's kind of lame, and they stop watching it now. Whereas I think what eventually they need to do is what WWE should try to do is try to age with its audience, because the reason they did that was because they realized that the audience from the original Hogan era had grown up, and now they had kids, and they needed to appeal to this new generation of kids, and not just kids, but to to stay with the fans of what was going on in the '90s. Now we're going into this whole safety era, but I think they went too far. I think if they want to get ratings up, they need to go for that same audience they had, that teenage, early 20s audience. And to get that audience, what they should do is
Jim,
just what?
we're talking about the Attitude Era here, not the Now Era. Stay on topic. Stay on topic.
Yep. And I will also just point out for the record that one of the reasons the Attitude Era got the higher ratings it got, also, like we mentioned, product of the era, is because there was less TV channels back then. Nowadays, there's way too much shit competing on a Monday.
This is true.
But let's go back
But
to the feel of the era.
Yes, but as I was saying, I generally it's at the feel of like I said, it had that intensity, and it had that, for at least from my point of view, you weren't supposed to be seeing it, but you were seeing it anyway, and that's what it was like this Forbidden show. That's what made it really cool. And I feel like in retrospect, it probably went a little too far, like Mo mentioned earlier, with the sexualization of the women and the treatment of minorities, homosexuals, etc., stuff like that. It probably went a little too far in certain directions, but I feel like in retrospective, you know, more recently it's not gone far enough, and it could be more like the Attitude Era, bring some of that feel back, I think. Because I don't think you need to go all the way back to what it was, but bringing back just a little bit of that feel, just going a little bit beyond where they are now, would be greatly beneficial. And I think that the feel of the Attitude Era is something that it's nostalgic, but going back to it too much would be a problem. It's great for what it was at the time, it fit the times, but in retrospect, it was too much.
Fair enough. And how about my favourite boss from the X-Pound, Marcus Shadow?
But
I can sum up the Attitude Era in one word: clusterfuck. Because that's pretty much what it was. It was chaos. It was semi-controlled chaos, for better or for worse. And like I alluded to before, like I said before, a lot of it was because a lot of that stuff wasn't scripted, especially when you got into the thick of the Monday Night Wars. I mean, that's pretty much how The Rock came about, because, as Dwayne Johnson has said before, yeah, Rocky Johnson wasn't doing too well. That gimmick kind of sucked. He hated it. It wasn't him. And so Vince turned around and said, okay, well, what do you want to do? He's like, can I just go out there and be me? Vince was like, oh, okay.
I will say, with you saying not a lot of stuff was scripted and stuff, I will say, based on one of the moments Richter mentioned earlier, I really, really hope Val Venus having his penis chopped off was scripted, or I feel sorry for that dude.
Yeah, some stuff was scripted. Cough, hand, cough. But primarily a lot of the promo stuff probably weren't scripted, and that's where you got a lot of the greatest characters, is when you let people do what they're going to do. Now, of course, you can't just let them go off half-cocked. You have to kind of control it. But, your best talent, you could kind of trust them with that stuff, because you knew they weren't going to take it too far. You knew, The Rock wasn't going to go completely off the deep end. And if they started going there, then you would rein them back and you'd say, dude, yeah, no.
Yep.
But, and a lot of that was a product of the time, which something like that today just wouldn't work.
It kind of works. Because I was going to say kind of works because TNA do that at the moment. They let wrestlers have more control over their characters, and whether or not you like the product, it means their characters feel a lot more like them than it does making them go out there and do something they can't really perform.
True. And I can kind of agree with that. I think WWE needs to loosen up a little bit. First of all, get better writers and let the wrestlers kind of semi-dictate their characters. But the Attitude Era had a unique feel because, again, it was a product of its time. It was, attitude. It was kind of the rebellious streak. It was all about being a rebel. Like Jim mentioned, it was all about doing things and seeing things that you shouldn't be doing or seeing, and that's what they went with. It was, the era of violence. It was a very bloody, violent era, too violent in a lot of cases. The over sexualization of women, the stuff they did with gays and the homosexuals, so gays and lesbians,
I have to
stuff like
say,
that.
sexualization and gays. What type of violence are you into? What type of porn are you looking up, Marcus? How many cups are involved in that one?
Too many to count.
2 girls, 1 jug.
There you go. But no, but with all that stuff in there, and like I said, you combine that with the fact that a lot of the stuff wasn't scripted. A lot of it was basically being run and somewhat dictated by the superstars themselves. Yeah, you get one giant clusterfuck. So it's easy to see how one might be turned off from it, and how, from your perspective, and I can kind of agree more of, yeah, a lot of it was kind of shit, but you know what? It was a guilty pleasure and it was fun shit.
Hmm.
And I think that's the big thing that's missing from today's era is, yeah, this era is still shit, but it's not fun. Not like Attitude Era was. Attitude Era was fun, and I think that was the big draw to the era, is it was forbidden fun.
We'll talk about the problems in the next section.
Hmm.
I was just talking about what did it mean to you as a person, which is cool.
Yeah, it was fun. I was older when I started watching it. I was about 18. Richter got we were in college. We met in college, and that was the thick of the Attitude Era, and up until then, I was like, yeah, WWF, that's that wrestling thing, you know, that fake shit. And I was watching, I was like, this is fucking awesome. This is, it's fun. And again, fun. It was just guilty fun, and that's what made that era great, and that's what drew in the audience of that era, was just the fun.
Fair enough. How about you, Richter?
For me, yeah, fun works. For me, it was really just exciting. Like I just liked watching it. I'd seen when I was younger, but when I discovered ECW and then went into WWF at the time, actually from the video games. But it was entertaining to watch. It was interesting. I liked tuning in because even when there was boring stuff, it was still, excuse me, better than a lot of the stuff that they have nowadays. It was just really interesting, and I liked watching it, and that was really the feel of it. And yeah, a lot of the stuff definitely. Looking back on it, I don't know. Still, the highlights are still entertaining. I don't know if everything would be, but definitely it fit with the mentality of the time. And yeah, it was really brutal, but that was totally fucking awesome back then. So I'm okay with that.
I will say, you played the video games before the SmackDown series, which was the Attitude Era, and you wanted to see more of this?
Well, I started playing. Actually, the first. Well, let me see. Because I'd played the Royal Rumble one, and then the awesome arcadey whatever that might have been also a Royal Rumble one.
Okay,
There's and
that's
then
fair enough. I was thinking the Warzone games, they were fucking horrible. The Warzone and
yeah, well
Attitude Era games.
that's really where when we played Warzone and Attitude or yeah, that's actually when we saw that. My friend and I were just like, oh, this game's pretty fun. We're like, who are all these people? Because from back in the day, we knew who like Bam Bam Bigelow was, Hogan, Lex Luger, Bret Hart. We knew those people, but they were like, we were like, who's this like Triple H D bag? Like, I don't even like a lot of the characters in that game were like, who is this guy? So we decided to actually watch it, and that's when we got in.
Wait, I recognize that Triple H guy. He's that Hunter Hearst Helmsley, the skinnier, posh guy. Whoa, he's bulked up in a way that's not steroids. I'm kidding, as I know he does bodybuilding, so he could have built himself up naturally. I'm not going to insult him and say he did steroids. He doesn't have the veins like Batista and shit.
Mhm.
Or Big Papa Pump. But I'll sum up my feelings for the era then. My feelings for the era, which on how it feels, and you can say this is a bad thing. It's up to you guys. I'd say I'd say like action. It's like an action movie.
Yes.
It's like, for example, if you go see like Transformers in the cinema, like the Michael Bay films, you're gonna see explosions for the sake of explosions. You're gonna like Attitude Era, you're gonna see weapons and blood for the sake of weapons and blood. But that's not always a bad thing. Sometimes you're in the mood to see shit blow up. Sometimes you're in the mood to see a human be thrown off a cell through a fucking table. Sometimes you're in the mood. Like I'll admit, one of my things I do enjoy watching. I do enjoy watching Rambo, just to see him blow shit up and go with the gun and shit. I enjoy that. It's one of those things. I'd sum it up in the same vein as an action movie, but it's like action movie, the TV show.
Yeah, it was like the 80s action movie of sports entertainment.
Yeah, because even like quote the face of the company at the time of Austin, he's like your typical action guy. If he's the tough guy that drinks beer and he's gonna kick your asses and he's gonna come at you in trucks and cars and shit like the Terminator come up. It's sort of that thing.
Hmm.
But I wasn't sure if you guys would take that as a bad thing when I said that, because I know you don't always like it. Because when you say action films, a lot of people don't like action films or the Michael Bay films, which I don't really like the Michael Bay films, but action films as a whole, I thought you might know what I was going for.
Oh yeah, and then some of that stuff, as bad as it is, guilty pleasure.
Yep. That leads to the final category, which yeah, I left this one for last, and I said this would be the one I led, and I led, which was not the last one, part 5, the problems of the era. Which during this podcast, I will say I've tried to list a load of positives as well as negatives, so it seems more balanced.
Hmm.
But I will say the problems of the era would probably be like the Austin McMahon thing was the focus, and like I mentioned, Austin was essentially the John Cena of then. Because
Hmm.
like when you see John Cena the entire Raw locker room, which he did with Triple H once, you got pissed off. Everyone got pissed off when you saw Austin single-handedly kick the crap out of everyone from WCW. That's kind of like, what the fuck? That's burying people. I did not like that. Everyone got buried to help Austin, or then later on, everyone got buried to help Triple H. It's like, no, in my opinion, it kind of hurt what the generation before it did, because the first generation was Hogan and stuff and doing the like Austin thing of you fed someone to Hogan to boost him up, and you fed this guy and you ruined everything. You buried this guy just to boost up the main face. Then you had the new generation where you had like Bret Hart do the King of the Ring thing where he put on different types of matches with different types of people in one night just to prove he could. Or he'd go one night with X-Pac back when he was the 1-2-3 kid, and he made that matchup look so fucking close. It was unbelievable. Which that generation was about establishing skill and about basically making wrestling fun for the people that wanted to see matches. Whereas the Attitude Era seemed to undo all that and make it back to like it was during the Hogan era of it's only the main guy that's allowed to destroy everyone, which I never really agreed with that. The sexualization of women, like I've mentioned in this one, that is a bad thing. Also, some of the stuff they did for the sake of controversy, like Naked Midian and stuff, was way too what's that word? Jerry Springer like for me, but
Hmm.
well, that was my problems with it. How about you guys? Take us away, Rick.
Hmm, problems. Well, um, I guess I can go with specific. Well, kind of specifically, but I felt that it more became like a victim of itself. Like it just kept trying to get in bed instead of reaching a comfortable plateau, and that's when we got like the corporate ministry and other bull crap. And I don't know. For me, it just kind of I'm not exactly sure why, but once you got into that in the McMahon Helmsley era, like once it downhilled into that, I didn't like any of that stuff, and I actually stopped watching for a while with when they started the McMahon Helmsley crap. It stopped being interesting because then it was I don't know, maybe it was just about the less interesting characters, or I'm not quite sure why, but I don't know, just none of the storylines were that interesting. Maybe I felt like there was too little. Like whether or not you like Austin and all that stuff, I can still remember that there were clear segments of like, oh, this was this plot, this was this plot, and this was that, and where once it went in the corporate ministry, that was like, like, oh, here's the corporate ministry section of the show, but that's like an hour and a half of a 3-hour show, and it was like, oh, okay, but if I don't like it, then not much I can do.
Which I could agree with that. You basically say the problem with that might be it became too predictable. Like during the Grand Helmsley, where you pretty much knew what was going to happen. But
Yeah,
I
I
will,
could go with that.
I will say on the record, just to back up what you were saying before you go back to you. I remember the UK only pay-per-view they did over here. I think it was called. I think it may have been
Insurrection.
No, not that one. It may have been. It may have actually been called Capital Punishment at the time, or it was something along those lines. But now, but the entire pay-per-view, every single matchup, a member of the corporate ministry interfered in it. And it wasn't even meant to be shown on TV for you guys and stuff. So it's like, why are you doing this? Why are you ruining the pay-per-view that's over here? Why? Why are you doing this to us? Stop!
But yeah, I don't know. That's about all I can think of at this point. For mine.
Fair enough. I can understand that. How about you, Jim?
Jim used jimming. It was
No,
super
I'm right
effective.
here. I'm right here. Sorry. It's late. I had a long day. I'm trying to focus. I'm sorry.
Focus harder.
Okay, so I missed what the last person said, so I don't, miss something.
He's falling asleep on us, Mole.
We're just talking about stuff we didn't like in the Attitude
Yeah,
Era.
it's not the
Negative.
thing you
Got
chose
it.
to
Okay.
ignore in another recording was the problems.
Okay, fair enough. Well, problems with the Attitude Era, like I mentioned, the fact that it went a little too far with some of the extreme stuff that we kind of talked about. The sexualization of the women, the way the gays were treated, minorities to some extent or another, stuff like that. A lot of the dangers to the superstars themselves. I mean, the chair shots to the head that are now banned. Some of the things like, I mean, just look at any given McFoley match. I mean, thumbtacks, barbed wire, and everything else, all the stuff they did, stuff like Jeff Hardy going off 20, 25-foot ladders through tables and stuff. They put their bodies on the line, for this entertainment, and a lot of them are no longer with us because of it, or have cut years, if not decades, off their lives. And that's really a big part of why I don't think that should come back. Because while it is great to see that sort of thing, these superstars, they have families, loved ones, they have lives. And, while I know they love their craft, they can perform their craft and entertain us without having to put their own bodies and lives on the line. And I feel like that's why it's important to make sure you have a balance between the entertainment and the safety of the superstars. Like I said, all the negative things, the Attitude Era, I can't think of anything specific. I know one big problem was a lot of times between the two companies trying to rip each other off to maintain ratings, and it led to some rather negative stuff. WWE trying to rip the NWO off and make DX, stuff like that. Well, it ended well with cool stuff to begin with. It wasn't necessarily the best thing. It kind of looked like it was a ripoff. So that sort of thing was always a problem, and it just kind of made both companies look bad here and there. Vince Russo, just Vince Russo. I don't need to say more than that. And just overall, there was a lot of stuff like and like Mo mentioned, stuff like the birth of the hand, things that could have potentially offend people that have gone through certain things. It pushed the boundaries of what was acceptable to be on television at that time, and so there was a lot of it that offended a lot of people.
I will say, Vince Russo's great when he has people to tell him no.
Fair enough.
Because he can come up with great shit, but for every one good idea, he'll come up with like 5 bad ones. That's why when he was in WWE as one of the header writers, or whatever you want to call it, he was cool because he had some people in WWE to tell him, no, that's really stupid. It was only when he went and ran the show himself was he a problem.
Yep. Yeah, that's a lot of the negative stuff. And there were a lot of problems, and that's why it was, it's considered controversial, and not everybody approved of it, and a lot of stuff, it was in the news about a lot of this stuff. Hell, steroid scandals. That whole thing came about.
Mm-hmm.
Vince supposedly, wanting the big guy, the big larger-than-life dudes, accused and sued and indicted for giving wrestlers steroids, and a whole big to-do came out of that. That was negative, too, because that certainly didn't help anybody.
pretty sure Vince himself did steroids with how his body went right before he had to decide to wrestle.
Yeah, he probably did. Yeah, I'm sure he did. And it's just that certainly harmed a lot of superstars' bodies in the process as well. The illicit substances they were on, and a really big thing. And this is pervades a little bit today too. What Vince requires of his superstars, especially his larger talent. I mean, if you haven't had an opportunity, I encourage you to read Shawn Michaels' book, because in it he talks about how, in those days when you were under Vince McMahon, you had to be at all the shows. Not showing up or not competing when you were, one of the top talents was not an option. It didn't matter how you felt, what kind of pain you were in, anything. Unless you could potentially die by going out there, you were getting in that ring. And that's why these guys were constantly popping pills nonstop, painkillers, all this other stuff, to try to fight through these nagging minor injuries that were not given time to heal so they could continue to perform. And that, again, goes back to what I said about a lot of these guys that are not with us, or that, cut, years and decades off their lives because of all this shit that they were forced to do in order to meet Vince McMahon's requirements to work in the company, basically. So there's a lot of different negative things, and you do have to remember that everybody always hails the Attitude Era as like the greatest thing in the history of wrestling. But you have to remember there was a lot of negative shit that went along with that didn't happen back in the earlier days. And some of it's, well, some of that I'm sure still continues now. It's a lot better now, I would have to think, based on just with the wellness policies and people giving time off and everything else. I think it's a little better now than it used to be.
I will say some of the stuff did happen in the older days too. I mean, I'm sorry. As much as I kind of like him in a nostalgic way, even though he's not that good in the ring and he's kind of shit, there's no way you can tell me Ultimate Warrior didn't do steroids. There's no way I'm gonna believe that.
Mm-hmm.
The dude's built like a He-Man. He's built like a He-Man action figure. But since that Jim listed his, how about your Marcus Shadow?
I pretty much agree with Jim and Richter. And like I said before, a lot of the negatives of the era came from the positives of the era. I mean, it was like a double-edged sword, and it was a product of not only the time but of its environment. It was a product of the Monday Night Wars, and unfortunately, that led to a lot of recklessness, which you see the after effects of that even to this day. And, a lot of the controversial stuff, again, product of the time, with the over sexualization of women, what they, the way they portrayed homosexuals, gays and lesbians and stuff like that. Um, can you use that as an excuse for what they did? No, but at the same time, you have to recognize that, okay, that's kind of what was expected back then, and they were trying, even back then. I think Vince was trying to, I don't know if I want to say keep, but bring WWF into the mainstream. And so, as bad as this is to say, I think he tried to use different types of tropes and different types of established things in the industry that he could, try to use those in WWF programming to make it, quote, more mainstream. And unfortunately, what was, you know, what was pervading up until around that point in time of the Attitude Era, what you saw in the Attitude Era. And unfortunately, if you look at the history of the WWE, pretty much from about the Attitude Era onward, Vince is, the WWE has always been about 5 to 10 years behind the time. Because as you pointed out, Mole, during that time you had people loosening up a little bit about the homosexuality. You had Ellen with her TV show and stuff like that.
You also had stuff like Buffy the Vampire Slayer teaching you that women don't have to just be sexual; they can kick ass and stuff like that too, without having to be the damsels in distress or the sexualized people. And we got what we got.
Right. But hey, it worked for the time. It's very violent, very controversial. The Attitude Era is an era you either love it or you hate it. There is no middle ground with the Attitude Era.
Fair enough. then we shall just round it up with ratings. Richter, what would you rate the Attitude Era out of 10 in terms of wrestling and in terms of everything else? Just in terms of what it meant for like all the various eras, how would you rate it out of 10?
I'd give it a 9.
Oh, fair enough. And Marcus?
I'd give it an 8.
Fair enough. How about Jim?
Yeah, I can agree with that. I think an 8 is about right.
Fair enough, and I'd give it about a 4.
Wow.
Which,
Ouch.
why do you always add wow after I give a rating?
Wow.
Because it's so disparate to ours. It's like, wow, that wasn't expecting
Did
it
you
to be
did
that.
you honestly expect it over a 5? You're crazy.
What, am I not allowed to express shock or surprise?
No, I'm just curious. I just didn't think you'd expect it to be. I expected
No,
lower.
I mentioned it because every time I mention a rating after we're doing something, you always say wow after I've said my rating. It's like I'm just being honest.
It just genuinely surprises me.
Fair enough. But I was your host, Chris, aka The Mole. I was joined by James Phoenix, Marcus Shadow, Richter Hammer. Catch us next time on WXR.
In the evening.